Today in your sketchbook, you are going to create an All About Me spray can. You are going to choose a spray can to draw, and then you're going to draw lines extending from the nozzle of the spray can. In those lines, you are going to draw pattern and script. Script could be your favorite song, poem, maybe a line from your favorite book, your dreams, your passions, whatever you want to draw about and write about that says something unique about you. Make sure to use different fonts. Make your writing part of your art. You can choose to draw any spray can you like. I would suggest you Google spray can clip art and choose one that you think you can do. And when it's time to add your patterns, be creative and most of all, be colorful. Begin by opening up your sketchbook and finding 2 blank pages side by side because you are going to use 2 pages for this lesson. You can look at the handout for ideas, but once you're ready, you can choose to draw your spray can on the left or on the right-hand side. Just make sure to draw really nice and big. Try to have your spray can fill up at least one side of the paper. Make it nice and tall. Now it's time to draw your lines. You want to make sure it looks like the lines are coming from the nozzle. You will definitely need a ruler for this. The most important thing is to make sure that your ruler is right on the hole of the nozzle. Hold it in place and then follow your pencil along the edge of the ruler. And again, make sure it extends all the way to the opposite paper. So you might have to use your ruler and then move it down to extend your line. It is really important to make it look like these lines are coming from that little bitty hole in the nozzle because we want it to look like the spray can is spraying out all of your beautiful patterns, words, texts, fonts, and drawings. You want to draw at least 14 lines, so 14 or more. Now it's time to add your title, All About Me. Again, think about different fonts and definitely find a place where you can put your name. My name is short, so it fit up at the top. If your name is a little longer, you can move it down your spray can. Add all of your things, and you're going to hear me say it again. Think of different font styles. Now, in between the lines, you are going to create a pattern. One area will be your drawings, like patterns and shapes and images, and the other row will be script. Like I mentioned, maybe your favorite line from a book or a movie or a song, poem, your dreams, your passions. When you are answering your topics about you, you can choose to either draw a symbol or write out the written word. For example, my favorite hobby is art, so I drew a paintbrush instead of writing the word art. My favorite sport is baseball, so instead of writing the word baseball, I drew the baseball. Once we finish our drawing in pencil, we are going to add color, and we are going to add different mediums with different layers and layers of color. I want to show you 2 techniques that you are going to be using. You are going to be using watercolor and you're going to be using water markers, okay? It's very important that the markers that you use are not Sharpies, but they say watercolor markers. So I'm going to begin by just drawing a circle so that you can see how the markers work. I am going to take a purple and I'm only going to trace the outline of my shape. I am not coloring it in like you would normally do. Now I'm going to use a watercolor brush and dip it into some water. But I want to remind you, whenever you're using a watercolor brush, you dip and drag. Very important. Remember that watercolor needs water to color, so your paintbrush is always thirsty. It always needs water. Just remember to dip and drag. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right over the edge of that purple. And then I'm just going to push that color into the center of my circle. It's going to give me a beautiful light purple, almost like a lavender color. And all I did was wet the edge and push it through. I'm going to show you again in this corner with the blue. I'm going to make a thicker line here. I'm going to wet my brush. I'm going to drag it. And again, I'm going to wet just the marker part. And then I'm going to push the blue where I want it. Now let's try it with the watercolor paint. I dip and I drag, and I'm just going to get a little bit of paint. A little bit of paint goes a long way with watercolor. You can see the beautiful red I got. If I want a deeper red, I go back into the paint so that I get a darker value of that color. When you're ready to switch colors, always remember to clean your brush, dip and drag. I'm getting a little bit of blue, and you can see again, just a little bit of the blue goes a long way. What you don't want to do with watercolor is you don't want to scoop out the paint or dig into the paint. You always want to be very gentle with the paint. Remember, you dip, drag, and just a little swipe, and that little swipe goes a long way. Now let's say you wanted to mix colors. You want to make a lime color, a yellowy green. Again, you clean your brush, you take the lightest color first, which is yellow, and you're going to put it right on the side, which is your painter's palette. So I'm going to grab a little bit of the yellow, put it on the side, and then just a touch of green and mix it with the yellow. That is going to give me the beautiful lime color that I want. Now that you know the two techniques we're going to use, you can begin coloring your artwork. Always start with the lightest color first. So what we want to do is we want to create a bottom layer of watercolor using watercolor markers and the watercolor paint. Once we have put one layer of watercolor over our entire image, then we are going to use a different medium to color on top. And those mediums can be markers, they could be art sticks, they could be Sharpies, they could be whatever you want to use over that really light watercolor. The beauty and uniqueness of watercolor is that it is very translucent. You want to be able to see through your paint. So make sure when you are using your water, you are keeping your colors very nice and light. You will know you're doing it right if you can see your drawing through your paint. Now make sure it is dry before you add any other color near the wet paint. So I've done almost all of the colors that I wanted to use except for black. Whenever I use watercolor or my watercolor markers, I always leave black for last. And black is a color you have to be very, very careful with. I just want to show you what I mean. I'm going to dip and drag just like I always do, and I'm going to take just the very tip of my brush and just put the tiniest amount of black, and it will be really, really dark. So it's a color you have to be very, very careful with. I think the two most important things that you have to be careful with is being careful with the black and not putting two wet colors next to each other. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that as well. So if I were to paint blue here next to the purple is already dry. But let's say now I wanted to add yellow next to that blue. The blue is still wet. What happens? It mixes with it. Sometimes you want that blending of the color, and other times you don't. So just be very careful when you're adding a wet watercolor next to a still wet watercolor on your paper. Back to the black that we were talking about. I want this to be gray. A lot of students ask me, but there's no gray in the palette. Gray is going to be a light black. So I would encourage you to dip, drag, take your black, one little swipe of it, and bring it over here. See how it kind of starts to disappear? That's okay, it'll still be there, and your brush will still have black on it. And that will be a better way for you to get a gray. Otherwise, if you go straight from here to your paper, you're gonna get a really dark black. So I'm leaving my grays to the very end, and that is how I am going to do it. You will know that you did your watercolor correctly if you can still see your pencil drawing underneath it. Remember what I said, watercolor is meant to be translucent. You should be able to see through it. So I can still see all of my drawings. I'm going to let my watercolor and watercolor markers dry before I go in for my second layer. My second layer will be with markers, with pens, with pencil, with anything else you can add on top of it. Art sticks, crayons, oil pastels, whatever you want to do to now add more detail and more texture to your artwork. Once your painting is dry, now you can go in and you can start adding detail. Detail might be using thin markers to really make the things that you want stand out. You can outline some of your shapes and add some patterns to your shape. I really like to add polka dots around my artwork, really close together. And now you can just continue going around, outlining, adding more patterns, adding polka dots, whatever you feel like you need. The beauty about this artwork is that you can continue to go back to this piece and add more and more and more, and it just gets more and more beautiful.